Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're discussing the flaws of the Blood Angels and Space Wolves chapters. How these two vastly different bloodlines each handle their so-called curses. General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe. So you have been warned, and with that said, let's just jump straight in. So earlier in the week, we had a discussion on the Blood Angels training process for new recruits. How surprisingly the first weapon the Blood Angels neophytes get a hold of is a paintbrush rather than a bolter. How the first month of their new lives within the chapter is dedicated entirely to non-combat training in artistry rather than the art of war. And this really got me thinking more on the differences of how each chapter addresses their flaws with their new recruits. Namely the two most evident, the Blood Angels and Space Wolves. How this process is handled within the chapter, and how it's addressed as they move forward. The similarities and the differences. And so that's what I wanted to discuss today. However, before we focus on those chapters, let's go over the gene seed stability for the other Primarch bloodlines as well. The loyal ones at least. As while Sanguinius and Russ may be the most famously flawed, they most certainly aren't alone. Let's begin with the Ultramarines. The gene seed of Guilliman's line has no perceivable flaws, and as such has traditionally been the most used gene seed throughout the Imperium's history, at least until the recent Ultima founding. The Dark Angels too have apparently nigh on perfect gene seed stability, with no known flaws recorded, meaning the line of L. Johnson is by far one of the most healthy. The White Scars, despite being frowned upon by the Central Powers of Terror, have also never had a recorded flaw of note. Talk of their savagery in battle for me is far more an inherited trait of the Kargan and the culture of Chagoris than anything else. There's no way that can be classed as a flaw in their gene seed. The Imperial Fists, maybe surprisingly, do have a flaw, with two of their organs being non-functioning. The first, the Betcher's gland, which is supposed to allow a Space Marine to produce acidic spit, and the second, the Sus-An membrane, which allows a Space Marine to place themselves in a form of suspended animation. Not the biggest of problems by any stretch of the imagination, but notable for the chapter. There is talk also of the Line of Dawn suffering from several mental discrepancies possibly related to their gene seed. The first, a form of self-deprecation, blaming themselves for failure. And the second, something known as Dawn's Darkness, a type of nightmare trance that overcomes the Marine with Dawn's most emotional feelings of loss and failure. The moment he found the Emperor fallen. It should be noted, however, this last one is, at this point, not reported as widespread throughout Rogal Dawn's bloodline. Moving on with the Iron Hands, while no clear physical mutations or flaws are recorded, the psychological damage of their Primarch's death at Istvan is believed to have somehow become embedded within the Iron Hand gene seed. The Sons of Ferrus have since become all but obsessed with the weakness of flesh, replacing their physical bodies with machine parts throughout their service. The Salamander gene seed has a noticeable few deviances which are officially recognised as flaws by the Powers of Terror. The first is a slower reaction time. The second is an increased ability to tolerate extreme temperatures. and the last is their obvious bright red eyes and onyx black skin, though this is specific to the Salamanders chapter and the effects of Nocturne's radiation. The Raven Guard gene seed has actually seen degeneration since the end of the heresy, with the Betcher's gland again being non-functioning. They also have traditionally had the mucranoid organs as being non-functioning also, which leads to the Sons of Corax's skin gradually turning as completely white as their Primarchs, with the hair and eyes darkening to jet black. So, while the Blood Angels and Space Wolves flaws may be more prominent, shall we say, noteworthy, they are by no means least alone. Perhaps the simple reason these two bloodlines are far more divergent than their fellow kin is quite simply because with them, the Emperor intended their flaws. Perhaps not to the extent that they may have fallen now, with the curse of the fallen and the blood drinking of the angels, but the mark of Russ, the Canis Helix, the savagery of the Blood Angels, they were both very much intentional by the Emperor. However, with the fellow chapter flaws recorded, let's get on to how the Blood Angels and Space Wolves handle their specific gene seed. Though both of their so-called flaws originate from the Emperor's original intent and design, such is the threat they can represent to their chapters today, both of these renowned chapters address and prepare their brothers to fight them, to resist them, from the very beginning. However, though the intention may be similar, their methods in some ways are not. Let's begin with the Blood Angels, as we discussed much of their methods earlier in the week. Now, the Blood Angels mainly recruit from their home system of Baal, during a period of time known as the Duplus Lunaris. Here, the male youths of the tribes and populace will participate in trials to prove their worth to join the chapter. The trials differ from Baal Primus to Secundus, but they are universally tough, with many participants facing death at this first hurdle. The victors of these trials will be assessed by the chapter's sanguinary priests for suitability, whereupon the lucky few, if they could be called such a thing, will be admitted as aspirants. Next, these aspirants face further trials where their numbers are whittled down yet further, until the final survivors are taken to the Arx Angelicum, the fortress monastery of the chapter. Here, ingesting a portion of Sanguinius's blood from the Chalice of Blood, the aspirants are then entombed within sarcophagi for a year to the day, whereupon the transformation to Sons of Sanguinius takes place. Those who awaken at the end of the year alive are admitted into the chapter as neophytes. Now, as we discussed earlier in the week, the neophytes' training begins immediately to prepare them for the Flaw. It's the first thing that they are made aware of. Such is the importance of this to the Blood Angels chapter that it takes precedence over any combat training. The first full month dedicated solely to artistry, and artistry alone, forging the soul of the angels in the teachings of Sanguinius, to elevate their nature over simply the battlefield, to aspire to beauty, becoming stronger in heart than any armour ever could. Though their combat training comes in time, this education and pursuit of artistry will continue throughout all of the neophytes' years, and will become a part of the Blood Angels' natures until their dying day. Perhaps it's a surprising way for the angels to combat the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. Yet to know Sanguinius is to know he wished for nothing greater than for his sons to see more than just the battlefield, for them to have a purpose post-Great Crusade. Now, the recruitment of the Sons of Russ bears many similarities to the ways of their Blood Angel cousins, though their thought process regarding their own Flaw may be rather different. And much like the life and career of a Blood Angels legend gave us a great glimpse into the Angels' recruitment with the novel Dante, for the Sons of Russ, the novel Space Wolf does the same, the very beginning of Ragnar Blackmane's saga. The Space Wolves, as you may expect, exclusively recruit from Fenris, feeling extremely tied to the world spirit of their birth. The Wolf Priests of the chapter travel the world observing the battles of the native tribes, where they select the strongest warriors to join the chapter, even from death, hence being known by the tribes as the choosers of the slain. From there, similar to the Blood Angels, the aspirants of the Space Wolves are taken to a region of Asserheim, where they are placed through vigorous trials. The survivors, the champions, then selected to move on to the Fang itself, where they face the Gate of Morkai. And this is the beginning of the stealing of the Space Wolf spirit, the chapter's test to see if they can take on the Mark of Russ, one where they can only pass or die. Now, the Gate of Morkai is a literal mist-reefed gateway, an archway deep in the depths of the Fang, covered in walled protecting runes. The aspirants each must pass through its boundary, whereupon they face the test of chaos, the appeals and temptations of each of the 4 dark powers. Only by conquering and refusing these offers will the aspirants awaken successfully. After this, they learn the truth of Russ, not the myths and sagas of the tribes, but of the real true Primarch, the Allfather's chosen, and the all too real sagas of old, the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. Here, after recovering from the ordeal of the Gate, they drink from the cup of the Wolfen, taking in the Mark of Russ, the Canis Helix. And thus, the transformation to a Space Wolf begins. Unlike the Blood Angels, however, the Space Wolf aspirants are shown what the transformation will be like beforehand. Through projections, they watch the effect of change that the Canis Helix will take on their bodies. And then, perhaps most importantly, they are shown what happens if they are unable to contain it. If it were to overwhelm their spirit, the curse of the Wolfen. So, like the Blood Angels aspirants drinking the blood of Sanguinius, the Space Wolves too drink in the Canis Helix, and it's a test for the spirit of both chapters at the very beginning. However, it's rather surprising to see it's actually the Space Wolf aspirants who get more information on the ordeal they're about to face, actually being told what the Canis Helix is and shown what it will do and what it can do if they fail, whereas the Blood Angels aspirants were not. I suppose it's the least they can do after shoving them into the Gate of Morkai beforehand. Now, while the Blood Angels aspirants are then entombed within the sarcophagi for a full year, for their bodies to begin the transformation in comas, the Sons of Russ, however, remain fully awake, feeling their bodies gradually transforming over the days and weeks ahead, battling mentally with the influence of the Canis Helix, the savagery of the wolf within. However, they are closely monitored by the chapter for any failures or surfacing of the curse throughout this time. After several weeks, the survivors who have been able to contain the changes are taken for the final test. They are placed alone, with nothing but a dagger, out into the wilderness of Fenris, where they are to successfully survive and return to the Fang. A dual threat of fending off the wild without and within. If they make it back alive and without succumbing to the curse of the Wolfen, they will have successfully become Sons of Russ and be admitted into the chapter, undergoing the final surgical procedures to become true Space Marines. And so through the aspirant induction and training process, we can see where the similarities have lied with the two chapters. The introduction and handling of their unique gene seeds. Both chapters rigorously testing all aspirants, ensuring only the very strongest make it through to even take on the blood of Sanguinius or Canis Helix. However, we can also see the differences too. For the Blood Angels, it appears a more focused mental challenge, with them slumbering within their sarcophagi for a year to the day, not even aware of the flaws within Sanguinius's bloodline. Whereas the Space Wolves remain very much awake, facing the physical challenge as much as the mental. They are informed of the curse, whereas the Angels are not. They also face the extra tests and challenges of the Gate of Morkai, and the final test in the wilderness, the so-called Test of Morkai. It could be these extra tests that then further explain the differences once they have become admitted into the chapter. Having successfully completed the aspirant stage, taking on the Mark of Russ, and being welcomed as neophytes of the chapter, the Space Wolves then focus entirely on combat training, apparently secure in the knowledge the Mark of Russ has been contained. Though yes, there is always the fight against the beast within, and any Marine can fall to the curse in battle if they fail to contain it. For the Space Wolves thereafter, it's largely a personal battle. No more time is needed to be spent on it in training. It's simply part of their nature thereafter. But as we saw with the Blood Angels, it's only once being admitted into the chapter that they are made aware of it, of the flaw, the red thirst and the black rage, and then how to resist it, how to deal with it, becomes not only an integral part of their training, but the most important aspect of it. For the Blood Angels, their pursuit of artistry, craftsmanship, the balance of the mind, becomes part of their lives forevermore. A eternal pursuit. Two vastly different ways of life for both chapters. And it's incredibly interesting to think about. I guess you can kind of see why both chapters handle it the way they do. For the Space Wolves, it's a very clear and evident physical transformation. It would make sense to make the recruits aware of the transformation and challenge they are about to face. And in passing the Gate of Morkai, facing the temptations of chaos, and then that final test of Morkai, the Space Wolves can largely be happy the curse, so to speak, is contained. After that, it's simply down to the man in question to contain it. To contain the beast within in the height of battle. For the Blood Angels, however, it's an ever-present risk, particularly in the case of the first. It's a desire and impulse they will always feel, they will always want. I mean, there's a reason the Blood Angels drink blood wine generally. It's simply blood donated and drawn from the chapter thralls. For the Blood Angels, the flaw is equally part of their nature, yet far more so in a way too. It's something they have to fundamentally focus on combating within themselves at all times. In a way, that's a contest the Sons of Russ don't have to worry about or face. You do have to wonder why the aspirants aren't told the truth until after they've drunk the blood and undergone the transformation, however. I can't really think of a reason the Blood Angels wouldn't tell them before. Maybe drop your thoughts on it in the comments below. However, overall, that's how both of these legendary chapters introduce and prepare their Marines to deal with their unique gene seed. Their flaws, as others would call it. Many similarities, yet notable differences. Unique traits that the Emperor very much intended within the Primarchs, and thus their sons. I really hope one day we get a scene of the Emperor discussing this matter in particular with Sanguinius and Russ. Just why he made them the way they are. Why he wanted those traits. Hopefully one day we may just find out. But as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think of the two recruitment processes for the Blood Angels and Space Wolves? What do you think about the similarities between the two? And maybe more importantly, the differences. Why do you feel the Sons of Russ are more forthcoming earlier? And why do you feel they have more exacting tests to begin? Namely the Gate of Morkai and the Test of Morkai. Is it because of these two tests that the Space Wolves then are fairly happy to leave the Sons of Russ to battle the Curse of the Wolfen themselves? Whereas for the Blood Angels, it's a very important part of their training. In fact, the most important part. And can you understand why for the Blood Angels, it becomes far more a part of their daily lives? Something they must battle eternally. As always, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.